I'm Thomas Green. I went into the service in December of 42, excuse me. Yeah. I tried to go in on the 8th of December, but when I walked in the recruiting office, he looked at me and he said, how old are you? And I told him, he said, you can't go. So he said, you have to have your dad's signature. Well, I said, well, let me have the paperwork and I'll get him to sign it. Well, Pop wouldn't sign it. So I went back in and told a lie again. And so he said, nope. The third time I went in, I thought, well, I'll really get it made this time. Didn't work. He said, you come back in here again, I'm going to throw you in jail. He said, if you can't come in on the right age, I said, well, so be it. So I didn't, but later on I did get in December of 42, and at that time I had already left Richmond, where I was living, Virginia, and went down to Newport News, Virginia. Was working as a electrician helper building ships. But anyway, I did get back and went into the Army itself, went down to Fort Lee, Virginia, went into the regular, Army, and the little guy, 130 pounds, 5 feet 2 inches, that 65-pound backpack didn't fit too well. So they decided, well, okay, we'll try another thing. So then they wanted me to train driving these big trucks across the Alcan Highway, hauling whatever was needed. And of course it was icy roads, and I was doing real fine until I slid off the side of one of them hills up there, and me and a tree got into an argument, and the tree won. So they said, well, you're no longer going to drive one of these vehicles. So I left and went down to Mississippi, and the old sergeant came out and he said, we're looking for people to go to the Army Air. And when he said air, my hand went up, and it's still up there. It never came back down. So I went into the Army Air Corps, and later on I trained a little bit for that. It seemed like every time I wanted to do something, they wanted me to do something else. So finally I said, look, I want to go overseas. So the next day I was on a troop carrier train on my way to Seattle, Washington. I said, oh boy. So I didn't know where I was going. But anyway, as it turned out, we got on the troop carrier ship and headed south. And of course, the Pacific's a pretty good sized place. None of us knew where we were going. And later on, we found out we was headed straight toward the Aleutian Island. I said, oh my God, what a place. Anyway, we got tangled up in a bunch of Japanese submarines out there, and of course I was always where I shouldn't be, and I was up on deck, which I shouldn't have been to begin with, but anyway I was, and I just heard this boom, and I looked out and a destroyer was out there, and he just dropped one of those death bombs off. That's when they had them in those 55-gallon drums. They kick it off the back of the ship, that thing would go down, it'd go boom. Nothing happened, so I kept staying up there, and pretty soon I heard that big boom again, and a few minutes later, bloop, bloop, oil was coming up. I said, aha, you're not going to bother us anymore. But anyway, there was too many out there, I suppose, so we turned, and I ended up in Hawaii, and from there on I was in more or less support than combat. I wanted to, but they said, no, we need you in support. And that was flying anything that was needed down under, which would go all the way to the Philippines. And of course, I stayed there for quite some time. And I was in the part of the Hawaiian Air Depot. And of course, we had our own C-47 there. And we would fly to the different islands. But mainly we'd go out to the Big Island and pick up fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, or whatever was needed, and take them down to the different mess halls, and but most of what we were doing was as a courier, and that was once a week. And of course, I guess they didn't have the modern technology like we have today, so we had to do it by aircraft. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It was good, and then I stayed there really until the end of the war. But there were many things that I had done in between times. I became quite associated with a general there, mainly because a friend of mine was his right-hand man. Well, it was time for his right-hand man to rotate, so he asked the general, the general asked him who should replace him. Well, old Joe Moxon was his name, and he said Tommy needs to be there. So I became the general's right-hand man. Well, I enjoyed that. I didn't do a whole lot, but fly around. By that time, we'd gone to C-54s, and that's what he had, and we were flying on that. And then it was time for him to rotate, so he said, okay. He said, how long has it been since you've seen your dad? I said, about 3 years. He said, well, he said, they're taking me back to the States. He said, why don't you come along? And I said, well, that's fine, I'd like to. So he hooked me on as the engineer on that C-54. We came back to the States and got into Wright-Patterson, and he said, why don't you go see your dad? I said, well, okay. He said, well, he said, it's kind of a distance from Wright-Patterson down in North Carolina. And so he said, let me see if I can find a plane to take you into Bowling. That's in Washington, D.C. And so he got some colonel, flew a B-25, put me in the nose gear of that thing. I'd never been in the nose gear in the 25 of my life. Anyway, he flew me into Bowling and got out, and I rode the bus from there down to mid-North Carolina, down near Raleigh. And I can remember just as though it were yesterday when I got off that bus, and the bus driver was a pretty good guy, and he stopped right at the driveway to my house. And I got out and started walking down the little driveway back towards the house, and Pop was in the backyard, and he saw me, and he came to me, and I think it was the first time in my life that he ever hugged me. But it was quite a bit of embracing there, and I stayed there for a while, and then I went on back and met the plane back in Bowling, and went back to Hawaii and started back in the old business of getting supplies, receiving supplies, and at that time I was driving an 18-wheeler, getting stuff off the ships that came in. Then we'd load stuff on the 18-wheeler, take it back to the dock, and it'd be loaded on the ship, down under it'd go. They never would let me get on that thing to go. But, so I said, that colonel finally told me one day, he said, look, he said, we need people's support. He said, those guys can't do anything unless we get the stuff to them. Oh, okay. So I guess it kind of consoled me a little bit. And but I wanted to get in combat real bad, but Midway is as far down as I ever got until later on, after the war was all over, and I had joined another organization by that time, and I did end up in Japan with what was known at that time the Air Force Security Service, and there I was still in support even then, but I enjoyed it. And then I went over to doing a lot of TDY, and so I went over to Korea. One of my units over there one day, came back, Colonel Weeks called me in the office. He said, what'd you find out? I said, well, being me like I was stupid, I guess. I said, I guess you just have to send me over there to straighten that organization out. Next morning, I looked on my desk. Here was orders to go over that permanently. Oh God! so I ended up in Korea then, and that was kind of rough, really, but it was all right. And so I stayed there for I think about 14 months. Then I came back to the States and I told him, I said, I want to get back into a flying organization. And that's when I went into the 314th Troop Carrier, which was on part of that Normandy outfit. But it was all over, and the 14th came back to deactivate. So I was part of a deactivation group then. Never could get in combat, no matter how much I'd ask them, get me out of here. Nope. But anyway, I was pretty well satisfied, and I stayed in for 22 years, and I finally said that I've had enough. So I hand walked my papers all the way from Bowling through San Antonio where was the Air Force headquarters then, and I retired a few days later as a master sergeant. So, but I was happy with my assignment, so I'm glad I went in, I'm glad I stayed in, I'm glad I got out. And I'll tell you, I'd go back in this afternoon if they let me, because I don't like the way the people are treating this country. My God, it's my country. Leave it alone. And that's just the way I feel about the United States. And knowing what's going on now, believe me, I'd go back this afternoon and say, let me. Because for whatever I could do, I just don't like the way they're treating this country. And I'm not worried about me because I'm 39 and holding. Just turn that 39 around. I was 93 this past January, and but I'm satisfied with my life. I really am, and I do what I can now. And when Scott Glover called me and wanted me to be here for this reunion, to me it's the greatest honor I think that I've ever had. And I met Scott and Matt in San Antonio at Stinson Field when they were up there on one of their tours. And I was out in my backyard. I was living in San Antonio, and I heard that airplane. I knew what it was. And I looked up, and there was my baby up there flying around. And I went rushing through the house, and I told Phyllis, my wife, I said, I'm going to Stinson Field, I'll be back. And I didn't even tell her where I was going. And as I was walking in the front door, Scott and his crew were coming in the back door of operation. And they spotted me with my World War II cap on, and here they came. And well, we just had all kinds of conversations. And finally Scott told me, he said, well, go on out there and get on the plane. I said, Scott, I can't afford to fly around here like you guys get the money you get for these tours. Scott looked at me and said, get on that airplane out. I said, yes, sir. So I did. I got on and flew around for a while and came back down. We still had many conversations after that. And then they left and came on back here, and I went back home. And I guess that we communicated, email or telephone. And it was 4 years ago this week that we met. And when he called me and wanted to know, said, can you still fly? I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to send you a round trip ticket from San Antonio to Dallas and back. And he said, see if you can get from Dallas down here for this reunion. Well, I'll tell you, I guess the tears came in my eyes because I was just so elated that I would even ask to be a part of something like this. And I didn't even really know what it was all about, really. But anyway, I went back in the house, and after I got the call from Scott and told Phyllis what was going to take place, and she said, well, that's great. She said, I think you should go. Well, I wanted her to bring me down here from Dallas, but she's got a franchise on cruise as a cruise planner. And she had already planned this group to take them on a Canadian cruise at this time. So I finally got a hold of this one friend of mine and asked him if he came down. And he was just elated that I would even ask him. And he brought me from Dallas down here. And so when I came down and saw what this was all about, and I looked out there and saw that, in fact, I'm looking at it now. that old C-47 out there. It's way out there. And I'll tell you, that's my baby. Nobody wants to talk bad about that airplane. They might get some of it. They don't talk bad about that bird. And so Scott asked me, he said, "You're flying the P-51?" I said, "No, it's a fighter." "Well, they want me to get in that P-51 out there." And I told him, I said, I'm not sure I can get in. He said, "We'll get you in it." We'll put you in. So I'm looking forward to it, really, to flying that, since I've never flown in that little spotter plane over there. I've flown in that many times in World War II because we was on the spotters quite a bit, and in addition to the old C-47. But I enjoyed it. I don't really know what I would have done had it not been for that, because I've actually owned 4 businesses after I retired. I retired in '64. Every one of those businesses, I liked them. When I got tired of them, I either sold it or gave them away. And the last one I retired from was I was national sales manager for a card company out of Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I handled all the greeting cards, birthday cards, and Christmas cards, and all that. And I had a nationwide contract with the Air Force Exchange Service, and I enjoyed that. I was all over the country, and I really did enjoy it. And then in '91, when we started phasing down with troops, I told them, I said, "I think maybe we better, if you're going to sell this company, right now would be the time to do it, because if you're phasing down in military, the sales are going to phase down also." So Ms. Pollard looked at me, she said, "Well, sell it." I said, "What do you mean, me sell it? I own about a ½ an inch of this, and you guys own inches of this company." She said, "Well, you know more about it than we do anyway." So I did. I sold it and made a good deal on it. And I loved both of those people who owned that company, and they're both passed away now. And I just loved them as though they were my own family. In fact, they treated me as their own family, and my wife the same way, because I made one surface trip to the East Coast a year and one surface trip to the West Coast driving, and I always had her with me. And they didn't want me to go by myself. They wanted me to take her with me. So that's what I did. I took her with me. But I'm satisfied with my entire career, really. And actually, I've been retired longer than I was in service.
Oh, yeah.
But and then when Scott called me and wanted me to come down here, I guess that was one of the greatest joys I've ever had. And at that time, I really didn't know what all was going to take place. And I finally went into my computer, which I'm not very good at either, and found out what it was all about. But I'm just so happy and just overcome with joy that Scott would even think about 4 years later to call me and ask me to come down. And I'm just very, very happy to be here. And all of these people, I don't know, I just love them like one big family. It's such a joy to meet different ones. And as my wife used to say, you old cronies are going to get together and swap lives. Not really, but swap different stories. And I brought a book down of the Normandy invasion that Scott wants to copy. So, and I'm sure he'll have some of it later on. But it's been great, and I really appreciate this.
Hi, I'm Eric Johnston. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and subscribe to my channel to enjoy many more aviation videos to come.